Bitcoin is looking a little shaky, and this is the most important week of the cycle. In today's video, we'll be looking at where the price of Bitcoin could be headed in this crazy, volatile election week. Make sure you watch till the end of the video to get my take on where the market could be headed. If you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and leave your comments down below. Let's hop into it. Firstly, we had one of the most bearish weekly candles we could have asked for. If we take a look at the chart, this is what they call a gravestone doji candle. The closing price of Bitcoin at the end of the week was around $68,700, which happened to bring us right back into this 50 to 70K range. That is not a good sign. After nearly tapping all-time highs, we ended up closing in the range and creating this extremely bearish candle. Now, if you didn't know, a gravestone doji candle is a candle that suggests potential bearish reversal. It's characterized by that long upper wick and a small body. Now, the worst possible gravestone doji candle would have been if the week closed red. That would have been horrible for Bitcoin. At least this one is slightly green, although it's definitely not a bullish sign. Now that we're back in this range right before the elections, we should be expecting a ton of volatility, and we'll talk about this more throughout the video. I talked about this as well on my Twitter, essentially saying that there is no sugarcoating this weekly close. If the previous all-time high attempt ended up just being a wick, and we close this week back within the channel, I would personally be expecting further downside for Bitcoin. And you know, Bitcoin isn't necessarily the problem here. It's your altcoins. Now that we closed back within this range, altcoins we can see across the entire market are seeing crazy dumps from 5 all the way to 20%. Altcoins just keep on getting wrecked. Now, at the bare minimum, my target for me to be at least neutral would have been to close above the 69K mark, and 70K would have been preferable. Now again, Bitcoin was teasing us a little bit as I was giving some real-time update. It looked certain that we were going to close below 69K, and we were actually into the 67K mark. But Bitcoin creeped up above 69K. It ended up closing below that target. So could we see a wick back up with this election volatility? Absolutely, it's possible. You cannot rule that out. And we might even tap and make new all-time highs. But we cannot escape the fact that a weekly candle like that is indeed bearish. On top of this, we can see that USDT dominance also had a fake out. For sustained performance, normally this would break down, and it seemed like it was going to break down, although it ended up just being a wick. Now, looking back on Bitcoin, we can see that we are currently red for today's candle, well within this treacherous range. Does this necessarily mean that we're going to be revisiting the bottom of the range as I indicated on this tweet? No, not necessarily. However, it would indicate that the next general direction could be down. So it's very important that you are aware of this. Why did we go all the way up to just below previous all-time highs, only to come right back down? Well, there's a lot of speculation out there that perhaps Kamala Harris could be catching up and may potentially have a chance of winning this election. Now, we can see that on Polymarket, the gap started to significantly close up, as Trump was actually over 62% at one point, and now he is at 58.1% as Kamala starts catching up. A lot of people also could just be de-risking ahead of the election because it is historically an extremely volatile time for the markets. All these factors certainly play a role in how Bitcoin is currently reacting. Okay, so what's next? We do have 3 major milestones this week. Number 1, we have, of course, the election, which happens to be tomorrow. Number 2, we have the FOMC interest rate decision, which, as we know, can have a severe impact on the market and people's willingness to invest in altcoins. Now, if we look at the presidential election, there are a lot of people on crypto Twitter right now saying that if Kamala wins, the price of Bitcoin is just going to absolutely collapse. And if Trump wins, it's just going to be a rocket straight up. Guys, I genuinely don't think it matters. Could it affect the short-term price and could it produce a lot of volatility? Yes, of course. But the general trajectory for Bitcoin is up. If you've been in crypto for a while, I hope you know by now that whoever is elected president will have no impact on the long-term success of Bitcoin. How do I know this? Well, Bitcoin has historically performed extremely well regardless of which party was in charge. Just go back and look at the charts and you can see that it is very clear whether it's Republican or Democrat, Bitcoin performs well and will continue to do so. And that's in fact a very good thing for the asset class. It's exactly what Satoshi would have wanted. There is no world leader that can genuinely have an impact on where Bitcoin is headed in the years to come. In the short term, perhaps that's true, but over the long term, as we've seen, Bitcoin will continue to prevail. So yes, while Trump is inherently more bullish for crypto as a whole, having raised over $7.5 million in crypto for his presidential campaign, it simply won't matter in the long run. I think that Bitcoin is just being used as a marketing tool for this presidential election. And so it's a good thing that we don't actually rely on the president to determine whether or not Bitcoin will perform well. People will continue to flock towards Bitcoin in the years to come regardless. Then we have the FOMC meeting where the Fed will make a decision on cutting interest rates. It's clear that the market is expecting a 25 basis point rate cut. And so in my opinion, this is already priced into Bitcoin at the very moment. And lastly, on Thursday, we have the initial jobless claims coming out. This kind of data helps us gauge the tightness or softness of the labor market in the US, and it ultimately determines whether or not people are willing to speculate on risk assets such as Bitcoin and altcoins, of course. I just want to bring your attention to something a little bit strange in this article, and it's the fact that if the initial jobless claims are increasing, it could mean that the labor market is weakening. Yes, we know this, but it also says that it could lead to decreased consumer spending in traditional assets like stocks and bonds. Consequently, some investors may turn to alternative assets like crypto as a hedge against economic uncertainty. Guys, in my opinion, this is a load of crap. If stocks tank because of a weakening labor market, crypto will likely tank even harder. We are not currently at the stage in this asset class where investors will turn to crypto as a hedge against economic uncertainty. Honestly, that's not the case. You know, we have the narrative of Bitcoin, the gold of the 21st century. So that, I'm willing to play around with. Even then, I don't think we're at that point yet where people will just flock to Bitcoin when there's economic uncertainty. But altcoins over stocks, not a chance. If stocks see a sharp correction because of a weakening labor market, so will your altcoins, and Bitcoin likely as well. So please understand this and please make sure that you're reading the correct information. So how will all this affect altcoins? Well, you know my stance on altcoins. We're still at that same spot. Bitcoin dominance is just continuing to increase. We broke out of this wedge, and if we zoom in a little bit, we can even see that it looks like we're going to be testing the top of this wedge and potentially hold it as support. Now, if that's the case, we could even see Bitcoin dominance push up towards the 65% mark, which would be devastating for altcoins. Again, it is not the time to be altcoin heavy, as Bitcoin dominance could very likely continue to increase until the end of the year. So please be cautious. If we look at the liquidation heat map, we can also see that there are some liquidations right above the $69,000, $69,500 mark. However, a bunch of you degens have been longing Bitcoin right here as well. And we can tell that there's over hundreds of millions of dollars here in liquidations right below the 68K mark. At the time of recording, we are currently at 68,300. And so I hope this isn't you at the current moment, but in my opinion, we will be grabbing all this liquidity here as well. If we look on a longer time frame though, we can see that there is one central area here where there is a ton of liquidity, and that is the $61,000 mark. Now, I'm not suggesting that we will necessarily go that low, but it is interesting to see this cluster of liquidity, and we know how market makers operate. Would a wick down there really surprise you as we head our way up to new all-time highs? Probably not. Something funny that I'd like to point out here is the fact that even Scottie Pippen knows that Bitcoin typically performs well after the elections. And he posted this chart on his Twitter showing the performance of Bitcoin. So it looks like maybe retail is starting to trickle in a little bit when you start seeing content like this from people that are typically outside of the crypto industry. So what is my base case? Well, on Twitter, I shared with you that if we close the week above 70K, I would be bullish. If we close the week below 70K, I would lean more bearish. I know it might be an overly simplistic view, but if we have a look at the chart, 70K was the area to close above, and we weren't able to do so. This leads me to believe that we could see some downwards movement for Bitcoin, despite some volatility with the elections. So again, this is a crazy period in our history, and it would not surprise me if there is a ton of volatility this week in particular. Maybe we wick up to all-time highs only to come back down again and retest some lows back within this range. But this weekly candle really did it for me and suggested that we could see some more downwards price movement. That being said, I am continuing to accumulate Bitcoin, and I'm already starting to look at potential altcoins that I will be sharing with you guys in future updates. We're not there yet with Bitcoin dominance continuing to surge, but there will be a moment in time, and I think that will be 2025, where our altcoins will finally outperform Bitcoin, and I will be there to guide you the entire way. Make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my daily updates. And if you want faster, real-time updates, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Crypto by Matsir. I'll see you in the next one.